Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. Cecilia Ziniti, welcome to the podcast Law Subscribed.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Matthew.
Well, I'm so glad you came on the show. I am a longtime listener of This Week in Startups. I'm even one of the co-local organizers for like the Chicago networking group. And so when you came on and you started talking about your cool GC AI product, I mean, like you weren't on there to talk about that. You were on there to talk about the open AI New York Times case. But we here at Law Subscribed love artificial intelligence. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah. So I love AI too. I've been practicing in the area a long time, but basically I've been a tech lawyer my whole career. And before that, I was a tech law paralegal. I started my career at Yahoo and realized like, hey, law and tech really was it peanut butter and chocolate or something. But whenever you have these big tech shifts, the law basically has to figure out how to adjust. And that's been my practice and it's been super fun. So I got to work on some really interesting products. I was the first lawyer on Alexa. I was hired at Amazon to potentially work on the Fire Phone. And when I get there, they're like, hey, all the more senior attorneys are going to work on the Fire Phone, but you can work on this device. We're not sure if it works. You can try it. And it turned out to be Alexa. So great career move. And, throughout, I was part of the tech law program at Berkeley Law. And so got a really good grounding in IP. And those are issues that I still advise on today.
Yeah. Well, if everyone wants to hear like more about Cecilia's background, I'm going to link to that This Week in Startups interview because you go really all that sounds so interesting, and frankly, that could be a whole interview. But here first, we want to learn about like this cool piece of technology that you're working on. But even before that, you're not in house anymore. So like, what are you doing now? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I had been in-house and then been a general counsel. I was general counsel for a company called Replit, which is a software development platform. I had a great experience there. They were a very early adopter of AI, had done deals with OpenAI back in 2021, 2020. So using literally GPT-3, GPT earlier versions. And in the process of that, I got to using AI and seeing how software developers were using AI. I actually think software developers and lawyers are quite similar in a lot of ways. And I had this realization that like the time is now. I've been practicing law for a long time. This tech is here. It was one of the first legal techs I've been truly excited about. 'Cause it generative AI gets to the work. Like other legal tech, and I built my own patent database when I was a paralegal in the early 2000s. So I've always been excited about legal tech, but this is the first one that's like the actual while you're drafting, getting in with you during that sort of pretty solitary activity of you and the screen, you and the typing, and got so excited that I thought there's a company here. I started teaching AI prompting classes for lawyers. You can find me on Maven. We can put in the show notes. But in the process of doing that, I'm like, there is so much value to be added from all of us having this tech. I got to build a company. So I found a co-founder, incorporated, and here I am. It's GCAI.
So exciting. Longtime listeners know I'm like a fractional GC, like that's my model. And
Yeah.
so, and we've had some other lawyers doing their own versions of that on the show. And while a lot of us are playing around with and using AI, none of it has like particularly been like designed with the GC attorney specifically in mind. Now, that's not to say I haven't demoed tools and been like beta testing AI tools that they decided to pivot from law firm owner to just selling to in-house because, selling to private practice attorneys, well, they're billing their time. And these types of tools reduce billable hours. And they were having a hard time selling these tools to private practice attorneys. So they're like, you know what? We're going to shift and pivot our target market to in-house teams. And now all of a sudden these tools become unaffordable for me, the solo practitioner. But this tool specifically, it sounds like, since it's called GCAI, General Counsel AI, it sounds like from the start it was designed in mind in light of your experience as a general counsel attorney. So, like, what makes GCAI like unique and designed for that type of purpose?
Yeah, so lot of amazing threads to pull in your commentary, but I think the incentives are quite different, right? So the general counsel job and just the in-house job in general, my experience, you need that legal knowledge and you need to be a great lawyer, but that's table stakes. You also have to be an outstanding communicator with clients, a good project manager, a technologist in a lot of ways, and a business person, So lawyer is like it's who you are and it's a part of you, but in the actual everyday practice, it's not the most important thing. And I can tell you that I haven't shepherdized a case in I don't know, since like I was at Morrison and Forster 15 years ago. And I just like that's not a thing. And so, when I see things about ChatGPT making up cases, I'm like, well, I don't really cite cases. Now, precision matters, but the help that GPT can provide with in-house legal work to me is somewhat different
Mhm.
than the help that it would provide to a law firm. So that was my idea. I also saw some super interesting trends that reflected what I had seen also in my work, which is in-house legal spend is growing faster than spend on outside legal services.
Yeah.
And part of that is like the whole do more with less thing. And then, that we've all experienced. And then the idea that, it's one third of legal spend in the US is on in-house, either salaries or tech or, that includes paralegals, that includes legal ops, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And, when I thought about it, I thought, I have this experience. I communicate well. I believe I'm a good benefits lawyer. How can I have an AI that's adapted to me? So that was my approach. And, the app now we can get into it, but that was the thinking.
And then, I mean, I do see that you have your own law firm, but is that like a side project thing? Like you have your law license, you might as well open up a practice while you're doing this?
Yeah, so I had a situation where the company I was at Bloom Tech or Lambda School run by Austin Allred, and had a scenario where I was helping them as I transitioned. I found a successor and I basically created a law firm so I could, have the entity to be able to do that work.
Mhm.
And in the process, I thought, my next GC job, I wanted to be a really great fit. And meanwhile, be able to serve some clients. So I did kind of what you said, and I did a fractional model, but it actually was a great way to really find the GC job that was a perfect fit. But in the meantime, stay fresh, represent clients, and really have some great experiences. I had one client in my sort of interim period where they were in the middle of a litigation and they were not happy with their outside counsel, which was an insurance panel provided outside counsel. And I said, "Hey, it's gonna cost you a little more because you'll have to pay for different counsel, but I think if we swap counsel, we can settle this." And I was only a fractional, GC for them for a short period, but in that period of time, we got the case settled on great terms. I switched them over to outside counsel who I'd used for that kind of case. I ended up offering that outside counsel the GC job was how much they loved them. So it was
Mhm.
perfect story of like there's lots of different ways to practice law. And then now I don't maintain an active practice because the startup is all of my time, but I have a few legacy clients that I still help with trademark office actions or domains or just like, hey, look at this contract quickly. And I keep those in part because I'm using my product. Like I actually think that customer empathy of like I've been a GC, I've been an outside, I've done these roles, you know, it's just different when you're selling to somebody who kind of gets it. And sadly, as lawyer, I mean, sadly or not sadly, like lawyers, we're a class of people. Like we went to school for 3 years, we passed the bar exam. Like, this is it's different the way we practice. And so being able to use the GCAI product for real legal work and like iterate and see how the prompts work, that's been very helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that makes us every single founder I've had on is eating their own dog food when it comes to
Yeah,
that
exactly.
technology. It's a great
Exactly. Like
sign. I
critical.
hope to keep that
Critical.
going. I
Exactly.
hope to keep that going for future guests now. Now I've done it so many times that like I feel like I have to always bring on the legit founder who's like using their tech. Um,
Good. No, I'm glad to hear that. Well, it's also like I think it reflects a passion too. Like, I mean, I definitely like, efficiency and finding the best way to do things. There's an argument that as lawyers, we're like a little bit lazy. Like, that's cool. Like, I'll own it. I think there's a quote from Bill Gates, and he's like, if you want a job done, find the laziest person because they'll figure out the easiest way to do it. So that's kind of like I definitely agree with that one. But
Yeah, and I
obviously
I
we're all
think
wired to work hard too as lawyers. So it's kind of like, all we do is take the efficiency and end up not being lazy and working harder. So anyway, there's that.
but that's an interesting, like, peek into into the psychology of attorneys and why all lawyers hate billing their time. Because they're trying to look for the easiest way to get to the end result because we're commensurate problem solvers, and
Exactly.
yet we're incentivized to not do that financially, right?
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, the billable hour, I definitely, it's been a debate since I've been practicing, and probably same for you, where it's like, oh, the death of the billable hour. But I think, what you will see with the advent of AI is you will see some stratification of like the highest level. So here's an example. Friend of mine, Rebecca Pike, she's at Vincent Elkins and she was 10 years at the SEC. So very specialized. She knows the SEC like the back of her hand. And the advice that she can give is incredibly strategic, like to the individual SEC attorney level, right? And you can't, an AI can't do that. So when I think about like how GCI helps or how just generative AI helps, it can do some basic drafting. But that high level of judgment, I would expect that she can continue to command big law rates because, if you've got a problem with the NCC, you want somebody who knows that or who knows the ins and outs of how they prosecute to do things. So that example to me was like, I don't think the billable hour will end, but I do think there will be some kind of consolidation. And then, as you said, you mentioned we were talking before the show, you mentioned there's a lot of folks that are underserved. I agree with Chief Justice Roberts that AI has a great potential to increase access to justice.
I still feel like your friend can find a way to, say, train her own GPT on her knowledge and experience and things she's written and everything, right? And productize that and sell it on a subscription plus flat fee or just a subscription or something to get access to her mind when she's not available. So I still feel like I feel, and if she could do that and not even have to work, why should she be billing her time? She could just have people subscribe to that and then update the model over time, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I think this, the idea that we'll all be able to be on a beach, like I hope that's the case. Like I definitely do. And I'm a big fan, with the podcast. Like I listen to Tim Ferriss religiously. And I had this like epiphany at one point. I was like, 4-hour work week. I'm like, why am I this sap working crazy lawyer hours? Like, I should figure this out. And it's a profound point of like, at some point is, how do you go from selling your time to selling, either a product or or your knowledge or your concept? And I don't know, for lawyers, it's it's a challenge. I think it's the nuance of any one matter is gonna be teased out. Ironically, I actually think AI can raise more legal issues, right? As we figure out how to get creators paid, for example.
It absolutely can. But here's why I think that even in her situation, it's not going to make sense to bill her time because I mean, we could use her as an example because maybe it's
Yeah.
easier for people
Sure,
to
yeah.
like imagine a
Sure, yeah.
person doing
Yeah,
this.
so you've got, like, an
The,
incredibly experienced SEC lawyer.
yeah,
How do they sell their services?
right. And so, and this could be, we could use any example for AI. And as a prompt engineer yourself, which I count myself amongst legal prompt engineers,
Great.
I think that we should think about what is our expertise and things that it isn't about how long it's going to take. It's that we know like what needs to be put into the AI to do the analysis, to do the generation, to do whatever the thing, and we have the expertise to analyze the results, right? And know that these are good results and these are bad results. Not necessarily sources of truth. These cases are real, these cases are not real. It's like, was this analysis correct? Is this document compliant with my awareness of the laws in addition to that fact that this AI has been trained on all federal laws, right? So like knowing what is and isn't a good answer and knowing what is and isn't a good prompt, that becomes the skill of the lawyer, right? And then you don't want to bill that time because it's not going to take very long. You want to say this is the value of the service I'm providing and assign a number to that where if you were billing your time, no client would ever pay that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many fascinating metaphors here where it's like, okay, if you're no longer driving the nails, like writing the individual words, then can you become the architect? And it's like, okay, move this wall, make this nicer, do this, whatever. You can imagine that scenario in law where it's like, okay, I've built a million houses or I've studied Spanish architecture or whatever it is, and be able to actually do that. And there's definitely the metaphor that I use that you may find interesting is that when I was in law school, we had legal research and writing, LRW class. And I think there were 9 sections at my law school, 9 sections of 30. And in that process, for whatever reason, this was in the mid 2000s, I went to law school. Half the class, half the sections were allowed to just only use Lexis. The other half the sections did Lexis, but they still learned how to like pull the books and look up cases in like the Federal Register, F3rd, whatever, how to actually get there. I was in the half that could just use Lexis. I'm not sure that using the books really helped them more. Like, we're both reading the same case law. And so, similarly here, like, I think law school could probably be 2 years, although we can debate that. But law school, like, the process of doing it, if you get whatever spit out from ChatGPT and like you have to improve it and you have to do better, or you learn how to do it yourself and then you learn with it ChatGPT. I mean, I'm not sure, but I actually, as a law student today, I would probably insist on using GPT in my work because that's how it's going to be in the future. Like I would say, like I said, Justice Roberts put out a report, which your readers should check out, the State of Federal Judiciary 2023, and did it on New Year's Eve. And in that report, he said, AI has great potential. And it may soon be that legal research is unimaginable without AI. So if you've got literally the Chief Justice saying that, like you can be for darn sure you should learn how to work with it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like you are, learn prompt engineering and learn prompting and learn architecture, right? If the new
Mhm.
job is that you don't have to learn to drive nails before you can be an architect, study the architecture.
And even with my use of I still find that I like because I just get in a mode, like I'm in the zone, and I will pump out a first draft of something, but it is going to look totally different from the final product after AI has gone through it.
Yeah.
Switch all passive voice to active voice, unless
Yep.
there's an artistic reason or specific reason
Yeah, yeah.
not to, right?
Sure.
Like summarize all of this into one paragraph and maybe start the document with that paragraph, right? So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like all these things where frankly, I might just give these assignments to an associate or a paralegal or
Yeah,
somebody,
for sure.
right? And say, hey, here's this franchise disclosure document. It's 600 plus pages. I need you to read through it and find all the parts where it tells me what the franchisee responsibilities are. I want that in a chart against franchisor responsibilities. And I also want it summarized so I could easily understand it. Well, that would have taken how many billable hours?
A lot. Yeah. Well, and even tasks, like it used to be as a baby paralegal, I made a lot of binders, paper binders. Now, a lot of people do virtual data room. And it's like I think about literally like those little machines where you like snapped it down and it gave you like the little holes and everything, whatever. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a thing anymore. And so like there will be things that won't be a thing anymore. But I think the level of quality will go up, right? Like you are going to get a lot of AI produced garbage. Like that is going to be the case in marketing, it's going to be the case across domains. But it will mean that the quality at the highest levels will go up. There is not really an excuse anymore to not have passive voice, right? Like if you can have a system that automatically edits it for you, then you should, right? So, I mean, for me, it's also like, as an in-house lawyer, and I think even as a lawyer, it's like your goals should be the client's goals, the stakeholders' goals, right? Like, how am I helping them advance their business? And even if it's a piece of litigation, ultimately it really comes down to money, right? Like you're trying to get them the money back or get them whatever it is, especially in civil litigation. And so, I realized this recently. The California bar actually has a duty of efficiency. And so like you could argue that we all got to be using this stuff.
I very often give some version of whatever the most recent CLE is on the subscription model, and I usually
Yeah.
reference the model rules
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah. So what do they say exactly? I mean, I feel like I knew that at one point, but I don't know the exact terminology. If you're able to pull it up, let's take a look.
I just pulled up my deck, so though I'm not going to screen share for the folks. Everyone's got to go watch Cecilia's This Week in Startup. She just had like a deck for everything. I was like waiting for you to pull out a deck during this interview. So in Model Rule 1.5, Comment 5, it ends with a lawyer should not exploit a fee arrangement based primarily on hourly charges by using wasteful procedures, which sounds a lot to me like what you just described.
Yeah. I mean, due to efficiency, where it's like, the thing is like, I don't think anybody, there's nobody, I'm not a cynic in the sense of like, I don't think anybody's like, oh, I love having high billable hours. I'm going to waste some time now. It's much more in the realm of like, okay, getting that perfection. And, I will say, as lawyers, like our detail orientation is extreme. Like when I work with marketers, I used to have a job where I reviewed press releases for compliance. But in that process, I would frequently, point out typos or whatever. And I remember at one point, the CMO of that company said to me, like, oh my God, how do you always find typos in what my team does? It's kind of amazing. Like he was like, it was like kind of a compliment, but sort of backhanded compliment. And I'm like, I don't know. I think it's that I'm a lawyer. It's all this training, all this reading, all this writing. It's just like part of who we are. And so I think instead of people saying, okay, I'm going to waste time, it's like, okay, the output has to be perfect because I'm zealously advocating for the client. That's cool. That's great. And like, okay, if the output has to be perfect, run it through ChatGPT. It'll be just as commonplace as a spell check, which is
Yeah.
actually some of the commentary I've seen as the bar association start to grapple with, how do we use GPT and courts? I think it was the Fifth Circuit was the first to have, like a court in the Fifth Circuit we had to acknowledge if you used these services. And I saw, an advocacy letter written to the Fifth Circuit saying, okay, do I have to say if I use Grammarly? Do I have to say if I use spell check? Do I have to say if, I have spell check on my system browser? Like, and you can kind of say that, like, of course, these productivity things will soon become so basic as to not require a separate disclosure because we've already got, as you said, we have an ethical role, we have an efficiency role, we have part of the practice of law is already thinking about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot's going to change. But the mention of Grammarly reminded me, and I'm curious since you're a co-founder of a AI legal tech startup now. I'm curious what you think about what the Grammarly. I can't remember if he's the CEO or founder or both, but he said he looks at artificial intelligence. I might have even said this on Jason's podcast. He looks at artificial intelligence more as augmented intelligence because it's not replacing, it's not in place of us. It's augmenting human intelligence, at least the way that we're looking at generative AI right now. And I actually think that if you think of as a lawyer, like it's important as a lawyer to think not as AI as like this smart, independent, intelligent, self-thinking thing. No, what it is it's a tool that gives us superpowers and augments our expertise, our knowledge, our experience. What do you think?
I think that's the right way to look at it. Like, especially, so lawyer in the loop is like, I feel strongly that way. That's why I'm targeting lawyers to begin with. And similarly, I think what it does is, like I said, it raises the bar of the legal work. So another metaphor that I've heard in the context of software development that makes sense here is, so Amjad Assad, the CEO of Replit, he's, AI thought leader and certainly a leader in terms of implementing it very early for software development. So he makes this point that with AI, someone who's not a software developer like me, I can ask GPT for a simple program and run it. It's amazing. Write me a program that calculates this. Write me a program. I did big fan of the book Atomic Habits. I
Mhm.
did a data visualization in Python where I said, write me a program that shows me how much percent better I get every day. If I get 1% better every day, basically visualize the book. So non-software developers become developers. People who are good software developers become 10x developers. And then people who are 10x developers, very good. With AI, they can actually run entire enterprise software companies as one person. So that's the software context. So I think it's quite similar with law, where people who are not lawyers, I have people come up to me all the time. Oh my gosh, I use ChatGPT to review my employment offer. The property owner of my building sent an updated lease and ChatGPT told me to ask about this provision. So people who are not lawyers can get some access to legal analysis skills. People who are lawyers they can become lawyers in more areas, or they can become faster lawyers, or they can be 10x more efficient. And then people who are amazing lawyers already, in my view, GCs, what did they become like Learned Hand, right? Learned Hand, Ben Hyman, like Ally McBeal, pick your fictional lawyer or real lawyer, but they can become sort of like really the icons where it's like, okay, there's no area of law that I can't tackle because I can get up to speed quickly, I can draft quickly. And then really it's that prime judgment that we talked about, that my SEC friend has, or that you have in the context of SMBs, or that I have as a tech GC. Like these are the kinds of things that we can all be just augmented, just like your guy said. Now,
Yeah.
is there a replacement aspect? Probably. But guess what profession went away with the rise of Excel is bookkeepers. People now are strategic accountants or whatever. And the title bookkeeper, if you look at it, it goes down almost 1-to-1 with the rise in usage of Excel. It's amazing.
Yeah. When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Speaking of AI and Excel, you could ask it to make formulas for you in Excel and they'll work, which is phenomenal.
I had an amazing one where I had this very complicated thing. I was doing something, speaking of the Carta controversy, but I was doing something related to a cap table, and I had to figure out very complicated, best dates and whatever. And I asked ChatGPT, give me a formula that does this based on the current date for this group, a different date for that. And these complicated ones, it was like if is whatever. It was like a 9-chain conditional, and ChatGPT did it. And I was working with a finance person at the time. He's like, "Oh, some stern skills, Cecilia. How did you learn that?" And I did not reveal my sources, but yes, I just asked for that type of formula and I gave it. So across professions, we're going to see stuff like that.
Right, absolutely. And those I don't know. I hate the word non-lawyer, but the lay people that were
Mm.
using ChatGPT to analyze. I also don't like lay people. What are you gonna say?
Yeah, I know, it's so funny because
You know,
people who bake are like, okay, I don't bake, am I a non-baker? It's like the same. It's the only profession where we kind of say people that aren't us are not us.
I know. So in my marketing material, I say everyday people, but a
Everyday
lawyer
people are better. Yeah. I
that could
mean,
be a lawyer. A lawyer could also be an everyday
could be an
person.
everyday person. No,
Context.
that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah. That's
Context
a good point.
matters. Speaking of context, those everyday people should probably be using Claude instead of ChatGPT to analyze employment agreements because there's a bigger context window, right? And ChatGPT is going to forget it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Right?
mean, definitely it is like that's been something interesting is the ability to judge across LLMs.
Mhm.
Claude does they call it constitutional AI, where it's like they have slightly different answers on the ethics points, different answers on the copyright points. My experience, GPT is still tops, but definitely it'll be interesting to see the competition too.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. I'll say that what I do to what I used to do, I still kind of do this, but my editing tool is backed by OpenAI, and so now they just added some AI features into it. But what I'll do is I'll take my transcript of these episodes
Yep.
and I'll because they're long. They're outside the context window for if I just use GPT 3.5.
Okay.
I throw it into Claude and I say, summarize this into 3 paragraphs for a summary for podcast interview. Then I'll take it because it's good, but then I'll put that summary into ChatGPT and say, make this better. And it will give me a better result because Claude doesn't do as good of a job at some things as what ChatGPT does, but Claude does a better job for the larger context window for free. And I've even heard, because I've used Bing too, which has the context window of GPT-4, Bing
Yeah,
AI, and
yeah.
it doesn't do as good a job as Claude does on the analyzing the larger context window. So I'm just using all of them. I'm like a multi-model user for the free ones, and then I use some of the legal ones as well. But like there you go. Like so I'm using both of them. They're going to be better at different things, and part of it is usage and figuring out how you like to use AI and which ones get better results for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, back to the software context, some of the providers talk about a society of models. So, like, some models will be good for shorter things or faster, or some models will be good for others. And, it could be in law, we're really lucky that we have this enormous corpus of written work being precedent and then being contracts. And so there will
Imagine
absolutely be things.
Pacer. Imagine training an AI model on Pacer. Could you imagine? Lawyers might be out of a job then. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can do fascinating things. Like, a friend of mine, Monfisha Kilpatrick, she's like, I think that, the future she sees is not only pacer, not only the pleadings, but you can also get the results, right? What
Mhm.
case is settled? And you can do really interesting things once you start to analyze the performance. So, same thing a lot of people are doing, there's startups doing it for the patent office, where, before AI, if you had a patent prosecution firm that was very experienced, Hickman Palermo is a firm that I used to use. They actually had each individual art unit's success rate, and then each individual examiners within that art unit, how the success they had for at the office action stage, at the second office action stage, at the appeal stage. And, and it varied, not a ton, but it varied enough to where, like, okay, maybe we change the title of this patent application to get a particular art unit versus another. And that kind of strategy, now that we have these LLMs that can analyze these vast amounts of data so quickly, is like, again, that will be table stakes. And so, like, in the process of zealously advocating for your client, like, how are you taking advantage of what we know? All Not only all the precedent, but also just the actual outcomes too. So yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
you. Like, that future is coming. And I mean, look, you're clearly, like, you and I share this, like, enthusiasm and early adoption, but I think it's coming to everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're in good company on the podcast because the listeners love this future too. Otherwise, they would have tuned out a long time ago.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'm so glad.
The a legal tech company that comes to mind that's been around for over a decade now, I think, is Trellis, which I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard of them.
yeah, tell
They
me, I don't know what they.
gosh, now I feel like I gotta have the founder on the phone. They were doing like the unsexy AI stuff before generative AI, and they were just going and analyzing state court filings to figure out to get analytics on exactly what you were just talking about, judges, law firms, and outcomes and all these things. And it was like really expensive and painstaking. And like now I feel like, and that was before like they could just throw it into like a generative AI model. And now
Oh,
she's I've heard this founder going on all the legal podcasts because now they're like,
oh.
I'm sure they've really ramped up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the idea of, like, big data has been around a while, and, certainly there's the offline version, like the patent firm was doing, and then, when you've got very structured, discrete things like, percentage of MSJ rulings given by a judge, like, that's something that's knowable, and you get to interesting things even in, like, a societal context. You've got I can't remember if it was Malcolm Gladwell or one of the, like, pop psychology authors wrote about that if you were to get sentenced, you're much better off getting sentenced earlier in the week than you are at the end of the week, where your sentences will be more lax, down to, like, the day, right? And, similarly for surgeries, right? Surgeries performed in the morning are, like, way better. And, all these trends over time where it's like, okay, if I'm going for a medical procedure, I'm gonna want the doctor to be fresh, and so I'm gonna do it in the morning. Or if I want, a radiologist, if they perform better with AI, yeah, they should use AI to review their work. And so that's kind of similar for, for law, where the biggest companies, the clients are gonna start demanding it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, client demand is going to be the thing, right? With e-discovery, that was like a combination, right? Because it was like,
Yeah.
I'm not paying an army of lawyers by the hour to analyze documents anymore. The technology's there. And also, there aren't enough lawyers because the documents became so voluminous, right? So it was like, it took both those things for lawyers to adopt e-discovery. AI is going to have a similar reckoning.
Well, and I think also it's like, Alex Sue had a great article this week about kind of painkillers versus vitamins, where it was like he had an e-discovery solution and figured out that the people that called him were like, had just gotten a huge case and were like, okay, we're screwed. What do we do? And call. And so there will be some crisis driven things like that. But I think it's also, one thing I've noticed is like when I've taught the prompting classes, people are like shocked. Like literally people that are like, oh my God, this task used to take me X time. Or I did this task yesterday and this just did it in 5 minutes. And it's like, so I think trying to do it before it's sort of like you vastly need it is gonna put lawyers ahead of the game. And we're a cool bunch, right? Like I think actually people somebody asked me, "Oh, like, do you cook? Because like law is not creative." I was like, "It's super creative." Like, I don't know. So I actually do. I mean, I love being a lawyer and I love it as a profession, but I do think we've gotten this rap of being uncreative, but we're totally not.
Not only is law creative and lawyers are creative, but the practice of it, is more art than science. Because at the end of the day, we're guessing because either a judge, who's a human, or a jury, which are many humans, are going to have to make a decision on something. And then if we don't like it, if there's a reason, we're going to go ask a panel of more humans to make a decision on something. It's all art. I mean, it's all art.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
you're
yeah,
1,000% preaching to the choir, and then you're
yeah.
also reminding me of my see, I'm such a, like, law school nerd. You're reminding me of my first year torts teacher who basically he did a really good job of explaining, like, the political economy of tort law and kinda saying, like, that, he brought up examples of, like, how a defendant speaks during their sentencing. If they happen to have a stutter, things like this, they tend to get worse sentences. So, like, things like this where it absolutely is an art. I do think it'll be a little bit like what is it? So the chief justice in that report, he talked about how line calls in tennis are now being done by AI. And one of the things that the chief said when in his confirmation hearings, he's like, "Oh, I'm an umpire, I'm just calling balls and strikes." And at the time I thought, are you really? Like, I'm like, the law is not a full construct. Like, this is not, it's like night, maybe 4D or something, but like, I don't, I don't know. I didn't happen to agree with him on that one. And I guess we've seen that. I don't want to get political. This is not a political podcast, but we've seen that in this court that, things that you would consider line calls, like 50-year precedent, they're not making the calls that way. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, it's calling balls and strikes, and I get to make up the rules of what's a ball and what's a strike as I go along, right?
Exactly, and corporations are people. No, like I said, I don't want to be political, but I do think it's been an interesting, certainly what we've seen coming out of federal judiciary. It's just been fascinating in the
Be-
last 5 or 10.
Being in his age gives you a perspective on it that the people, the everyday people, don't have.
I think that's right. I mean, I think it's like, you know, I see it most in tech because I'm in Silicon Valley, but I think it replicates across society for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I would love a demo.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's dive in.
Okay. So let's show. So here's a reason. If you're not already a Substack subscriber, the videos are up on Substack. So lawsubscribe.com and subscribe to the Substack, and let's check out a GCAI demo. And the website, of course, is getgc.ai. Link in the show notes.
All right. So here I am at the homepage of GCAI. Basically, I've logged in and it's sort of similar to ChatGPT in format, but there's a there's a meme that went kind of viral where the head of AI of Wikimedia Foundation, the whole tweet was GPT is a golden retriever. And it's true. GPT is wonderful, but it's a little bit overeager. It doesn't talk like a lawyer, it's a little verbose, it uses passive voice. So what I've done is incorporated how I speak and communicate as a GC into this. I've incorporated GPT-4, so got the best model, the one that passed the bar exam. And then I've got some features where it actually customizes the response to your company. So you can see, I can add the company context. I'm going to try one without a company context, and then we can go through adding one. Let's pick a question that we could ask. So let's see. Send a let's draft a reminder letter to a former employee of their confidentiality obligations. Okay, let's see what happens. This happens pretty commonly. I get asked to do this all the time. In this particular case, we had a salesperson who took the contact list. Let's see how it goes.
So while it's drafting this, I've heard Sam Altman saying recently GPT-5 is just around the corner. So when that comes out, or do you have like access to Ford Turbo? Like when you're developing using it, do they give you access to like some of the newest models that are out there?
Yeah, I haven't had access to GPT 4.5 yet. What I have heard is that they're using GPT 4.5 to check the copyright analysis of GPT 4. So kind of a fun fact, if you actually ask it for copyrighted material and it stops halfway through, that's because GPT 4.5 is telling it to stop. So that's kind of a fun inside baseball trick that your readers may appreciate or your listeners may appreciate. But
Very cool.
basically what's done, it has asked questions. So unlike regular vanilla GPT, which would probably just spit out the letter, it's asked me some good questions. Okay, what's the name of the former employee? Is there a specific agreement that they signed? Do you have evidence or just a suspicion? And what do you want the tone of the letter to be? This is pretty helpful, actually. So that's exactly what I would ask. So the name, let's just say it was John Jones, and he was sales manager East Coast. And it was my company used a CIA, confidential inventions and assignment agreement, confidentiality invention assignment agreement. CIA, it has confidentiality requirements uh, and prohibit taking company materials on departure, right? And then the question, do you have evidence? We suspect it. All right. And then are there any immediate actions you want to take? Let's for now, a reminder. And then in terms of tone, make the letter short from me, which you see, and no niceties, but not too threatening. So this is kind of a reminder. I've sent, I got to tell you, as a GC, I've sent a dozen of these, and it's a pretty common randomly. You're working on something else, and it's like you get that ping from somebody that's like, oh, let's send this letter. So let's take a look.
And while that's drafting, so this is the kind of thing that it's just like interacting with another person on your team. And that's why I think anyway, and some stuff I've written about it, that I think that the like quote older attorneys or more experienced attorneys, right, who are like who typically have not adopted AI, so,
Yeah.
or have not adopted technology, it's because they had to learn a new technique, learn how to click this and that and this. This is just communicating with it in text, just like you communicate with a person, right?
Exactly. Like, I actually think lawyers are in a great spot to use AI because we've all been interns and most of us have managed interns. And like that summer associate thing, we've all had that feeling of like, oh, should I ask for clarification? And the best interns, they ask questions like this so they can do what you want. And so these skills of like, look, lawyers are amazing Googlers. We've all been Googling things for 20 years. And like, those seem like training yourself to think, not only am I asking to find the information, I'm asking it to put it in a certain format that I like. Well, you'll see it did a pretty good job. Dear Mr. Jones, this letter is a reminder of your confidentiality obligations during your tenure with the company. So at this point, I haven't added company name yet, but if I had, it would actually have my company there.
The context. You could add company
Yeah,
context.
we add the company context, and that's sort of like adding, fancy word is system prompt. But it basically at that point, if I go in here and I say, my company is General Counsel AI Inc. We're in Burlingame, California. We're incorporated in Delaware. We have a certain number of employees. And then, we're in the software industry. We have, whatever revenue that we have. And then essentially a great GC, if you're thinking about like when you onboard a new client, you want to know like their basic business, you want to know their risk tolerance, you want to know about them so you can get them the best legal advice for them. And so this company context, we basically have, we've tailored it with AI of like, what are the things that are specific to this company? And so that's how we do it. And then, we create the new company context. And then, I've got to enter description. The General AI Inc. is a startup in California. We have 3 employees and we are venture backed, and basically explaining things about the company. We sell to lawyers and we are fairly buttoned up about risk. That's basically telling it like we might want to take strategic risk, but in general, this is going to be the tonality of the answers. So I'm going to create that company context and then basically go back to the chat, and I can actually pull down, if you in your case, Matthew, you could actually have your different clients here so that if you were drafting that letter for client X, it would just all have all that information in there.
Mhm.
Great for creating shells. Other fun thing is we do have the document uploader so one of the things I did recently was open up a bank account. So super exciting. You incorporate, you open a bank account. You've probably done this for clients. And in the process of that, one of the banks was doing some kind of promotion where I could get cash back if I maintained a certain balance and signed up for interest suite. Super cool. But I'm busy. I'm a startup founder. Did I have time to actually review this in detail? No, maybe not. But, if I've got a young associate that I can ask, I'm going to ask. So I'll say, please. So I'm going to say, I'm going to attach the agreement. So I'll look for PNC. One second. I went into Zoom window. I'm going to attach the agreement here. And then while that's uploading, I'm basically going to say like, hey, give me a summary of this agreement. And then for the security people, you say, okay, this looks a lot like ChatGPT, but couple things. One, we have a single tenant architecture. So what that means is that your data is not mixed with others, nor is it sent to OpenAI. So like that's one thing. Another is we've got an awesome roadmap informed by being a GC. So for me, like Slack is where I mostly get hit with questions. So we got a Slack integration coming. The other stuff is just like so many possibilities, like more in the context, uploading having your Google Docs in there, having your Dropbox in there. So there's lots of things we could do. But here's that agreement. I'm going to ask, like, hey, hello, we opened our first bank account. Please give me the 4 most important provisions of this agreement. Can you tell me what fees I should pay? So let's see. If you asked a smart intern this, what would they come back with? Let's take a look.
And they'd have to, it would take them a lot of time, right? And while that
They'd have to
goes,
read it. They'd
so,
have to
so,
read it.
and the AI is analyzing it, quote reading it. But something that I'd like to know if you can do right now, or if it's on the product roadmap, is
Yeah.
compare two documents. Something that I think every GC lawyer, or if you've ever done any work that's like GC, that you've always thought about doing, but you've never had the time to do, is, and if you're billing time, your client would never pay you to do this, is actually read through the whole document again that's been redlined as you're getting towards the end, just to make sure they didn't sneak anything in there, right? And so, like, you've never been able to actually do that, but now with AI, you could like, okay, how does this compare against this, and are there any actual changes from the last document, right? So, like, will you be able to do something like that in GCAI?
Yeah, so saw a great comparison. I think it was Contract Nerds. She basically did a great blog post. I would put it in the show notes that was like comparing using GPT to compare two documents. And her experience is it was not great. Now,
Mhm.
I think what's tough is like GPT is like you have to be pretty specific about what you're looking for. So yeah, roadmap in terms of like give it point for point, right? Like literally ask it to do that kind of comparison. Because if not, that what we're talking about, that lawyers are kind of lazy. It's just exactly like an intern. It's kind of like trying to give you a quick answer, and it might miss some things. But what it's good for is that initial like, and then you can ask it again. Like that's another thing I teach in my prompting classes is just iterate.
Mhm.
But the actual comparison, I did have a situation where, so I used GPT to help me get my Italian passport renewed. The Italian passport consulate, sort of notoriously difficult government office, and
Mhm.
the Italian government office, and it helped me get a passport. But in that process, compared to Italian documents, and it was garbage. So that was no good. But yeah, you can see here where you can iterate. I can I can say make a table of the above, use emoji for each section. Include the title. So that's also pretty cool that you can do that. So frequently have to make a deck explaining a contract to a client. And look, transfer instructions, it's got money flying away. fees. It's got the little money bag. So this kind of thing where it's like this basic, give me a first draft. That's what GCAI and AI in general, but in particular GCAI is really great at.
All right.
So I'll stop sharing and we can kind of
We'll wrap
chat
it up.
more. But this
Yeah.
was so much fun, Matthew.
It was a pleasure to have you on, and no using GCAI for this question that I ask of all of my guests, which
Please.
is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
Ah, so I took an Airbnb experience class where this was the topic, right? Remember when Zoom first happened, when the pandemic first happened, we're all on Zoom. So a hot dog is not a sandwich because it has its own taxonomy. And we all know what a hot dog is, and therefore it's specifically excluded from sandwiches.
Sounds like a bunch of lawyers came to that conclusion.
That's a great one. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
You too. Wait, where can people find you?
Yeah, so getgc.ai is the wait list. Cecilia Ziniti on LinkedIn. I post about AI pretty often, or Cecilia Zin on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.